So this is the second lecture for Anthropology 490 senior seminar. And just building off of the last lecture, the kind of uh, work of Franz Boas in sort of establishing contemporary four-field anthropology to kind of look at this legacy of what we call holism in our discipline. So holism really is a key part of an undergraduate education in anthropology. If you think about the requirements, right, that you were asked to take over your education here at EWU, you are asked, in fact, you are required to take coursework in all of the subfields. In fact, in the past, we even had a course in integrating, but we've tried to begin to incorporate the integration of subfields across the curriculum. Obviously, it's an important part, right, of your education, where we wouldn't have had those requirements. Why do we have those requirements? Because holism is an essential part of anthropology. It's an essential part, right, of building this kind of anthropological understanding of humanity on a complex and interdisciplinary foundation. Holism in anthropology really is this idea that we can't understand humanity, right, without that big picture perspective. Without the perspective, right, of each of the subfields and the discrete kinds of research that they do, how it gets integrated, right, in the discipline of anthropology itself. This really is what we mean when we refer to holism in a most kind of basic sense or basic way. If we think to Boas and Boasian holism, think back to when Boas was developing that anthropology program at Columbia University. At the time, anthropology was really understood in terms of physical anthropology. And physical anthropology was dominated by a particular kind of theoretical framework, a particular kind of methodological framework, a system or set of different kinds of research practices and knowledge production practices. But what Boas believed, what Boas thought as he developed that unique program at Columbia University, within the context of Darwinian evolutionism, right, humans were animals that were amenable to be studied, right, through natural sciences and then what become the social sciences. But for Boas, right, new areas like linguistic and cultural anthropology, maybe at the time we should say linguistics, right, and ethnology, as it would have been known during that period of time, comes to be called cultural anthropology in the American context because it's much less comparative than older forms of ethnology. Well, Boas believed that these areas, they not only help us understand humanity, but if you think about what Boas was arguing, these areas are essential not only just to understand humanity as a unified species, right, but human differences. That during the time of physical anthropology and the dominance of those Darwinian theories and methods, that really wasn't developed, is to understand human differences in their own terms, right? To understand different human understandings, to understand the different worldviews reflected by different populations. And so for Boas, he wanted to bring other kinds of methods and other kinds of theories to bear on these differences, these human differences, so that we wouldn't be always comparing, always looking at animals simply through a natural or social science lens, but that we would look at it from the arts and the humanities, right? Through the meanings that different groups of people understand the world through, the way that different groups of people understand themselves. And he kind of really built this upon a distinction, right, between what can be understood through evolutionism, what can be understood through the evolution of human biology. He wanted to build on that through highlighting learned behavior. And that is where learned behavior and the way that reflects human differences becomes really an essential part of anthropology, as much as the biological heart, right, of anthropology too. So taken as a whole, we get a really big picture, right, of both biology and culture, both innate characteristics, right, and acquired and learned ones. By adding archaeology, he enabled us to have a long-term view through time, not only of the development of human biology, but through the development of human social relationships and human worldviews. And in the Boasian framework, right, the idea is that this holistic understanding that we get from combining these fields is much richer than an understanding that is built upon one of them or is built on, let's say, two of them. He really wanted to integrate the subfields to provide a very robust understanding that's drawing on a variety of different theories. So evolutionism, Darwinian theory is still with us today. But, right, we have multiplied the theories in ways that sometimes we have theories that will contradict each other. We will have theories that conflict with each other. We will have methods, right, that require a great deal of specialization in one subfield or another. But truly, Boas's idea was a holistic one, that these would eventually come back and be integrated, right, within the discipline of anthropology as a whole. And anthropology as a whole would be educating generations of students in sort of the richest understanding of human beings that there could be. That was his goal. Whether or not he achieved that, whether or not that's where we are in anthropology today, this is, I think, very controversial, and there's a lot of debate about it. But the idea of holism in anthropology is a fundamental part of the basic knowledge of our field. If we think about this integrating aspect, right, why are we emphasizing this? Why is this important? Well, again, many of these issues that we are facing in the 21st century involve complex, intersecting areas of human experience. I mean, just in developing this lecture, I am thinking about the healthcare issues. Let's say what we think about in terms of the pandemic, the issues related issues of food and agriculture, including animal husbandry and animal health, veterinarian health. I'm talking about the environment, right? And complex global systems that bring different environments into interaction. Really, are any of these problems understandable and solvable through a narrow lens? And many anthropologists say they're not. That's why we're anthropologists, because we really do believe that there is biology involved in these problems, there is learned behaviors, there's social relationships, there's the way the world means, and so on, that all kind of come together in a nexus in these problems. We need anthropology and the variegated knowledges, the variegated practices, because we want to have an understanding of the human body and the biosphere, right? The environment of which it's a part. We want to understand how people involved in those issues understand it, right? What are they doing in terms of their behaviors towards it? We want that element of time. We don't want to look at it from a very narrow kind of contemporary vantage point. We want to see the long-term temporal depth to the issues. So integrating anthropology provides that holistic view. And holism in anthropology, holism sort of in its Boasian framework, really is simply just a way to avoid accepting as sufficient any simple explanation for humans and the issues they face. And that's really going back to Boas and seeing the way that the, as it was termed, the armchair theorists who were sitting in chairs, sitting at tables, looking at documents, looking at the writings of missionaries, let's say, or colonial administrators, and the way that they were providing very oversimplistic explanations for human behavior, whether that would be the behavior of people in the colonies, right? Whether that would be people who had been immigrating here, whether that had been people talking about African Americans and talking about slaves and so on. Boas brought holism to anthropology because of what he saw happened, right? When you only viewed humanity or the human condition from one of those lenses. He wanted to multiply the lenses in a way that would provide a richer picture. So to conclude here, we've been starting off really just exploring one of the educational goals, right, for our major. And as it's stated, one of the things that all the students need to achieve to get this BA in anthropology is this basic knowledge in and integration of each of the 4 anthropological subfields. So it leaves us with this question of, well, how exactly do different theories, methods, and practices across the subfields become integrated in a holistic picture of humanity? You know, I've sketched out the issue of holism. I've sketched out its importance to anthropology. But now the question becomes to you, how in your education did you see these different knowledges coming together and providing a picture of humanity that you would not have had otherwise? That really is the question that's behind this first exercise.